The Zoning Advisory Committee is a preliminary matter. This is Curtis Smithson, Zoning Advisory Committee Chair. I'll do the confirmation of members here a little bit. Go back to that. Introduction to our remote meeting. Good evening. This open meeting of the Zoning Advisory Committee has been conducted remotely, consistent with the recently signed an act extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency. This act includes an extension until March 31st of 2023 of the remote meeting provisions of his March 12th, 2020 executive order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. The new law has two major parts. First, the new law allows public bodies to continue providing live, adequate alternative means of public access to the deliberations of the public body instead of holding meetings in a public place that is open and physically accessible to the public. Adequate alternative means may include, without limitation, providing public access through telephone, internet, or satellite-enabled audio or video conferencing or other technology that enables the public to clearly follow the proceedings of the public body in real time. Second, the new law authorizes all members of the public body to continue participating in meetings remotely. The open meetings law's requirement that a quorum of the body and the chair be physically present at the meeting location remains suspended. For this meeting, the Zoning Advisory Committee is convening by video conference via Zoom app is posted on the town's web meeting calendar and the ZAC agenda identifying how public may join. Additionally, the meeting may also be broadcast by HCAM through one or more of its channels or platforms. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that others may be able to see you and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. Meeting business ground rules. So I'll wait on that. We're still one short, aren't we?
We're one short. I know Elise and Mary are not going to come. John Catino and Nisha are the only other options because Sundar's seat hasn't been full. Oh, and there's Nisha right now.
Is Paul filling Sundar's seat?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
He can, eventually.
He's sitting there right now.
Okay, I guess we'll, members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. See, John Catino is not here. Ted Barker-Hook.
Affirmative.
No Elise, no Ron. Madhu.
Madhumita Chandrasekhar present.
Mary's not here. Rachel's not here. Nisha.
Nisha Nanave present.
And James.
Present.
And John Gelsich is also present for staff.
Yep.
We're now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each item in the agenda. If members wish to engage in dialogue with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. Not every agenda item will feature public comment. For items with public comment, after members have spoken, the chair will afford public comments as follows. The chair will first ask members of the public who wish to speak to identify their names and addresses. Once the chair has a list of all public commenters, I will call on each by name and afford 3 minutes for any comments. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. Okay, I can close that. Item one is tree protection. I think we're going to kind of delve back into kind of where we left off. We had put together I guess it was entitled Tree Protection / Site Alteration that I guess was pulled kind of at the last minute for the 2021 town meeting. I went through and found several ordinances of surrounding towns that covered, I think our goal was to try to address some tree protection on private property rather than public property, which I guess our Our scenic roads, pretty much the only thing that covers any tree protection at this point. And the Conservation Commission, I guess, also has jurisdiction over areas that are in the conservation lands. So see if I can share. I went through tree protection ordinances in Concord, Newton, Lexington, and Wellesley, and kind of compared what they addressed and how they addressed them and what they called a protected tree and whether permits were required, any exemptions, and kind of the mitigation that was required in the different ones. So basically the trees protected in Concord, it was residential lots during significant demolition and construction activity. Newton basically addressed land within the city that wasn't owned by a government entity, be it the town or the state or the federal government. Lexington included public and private ways, so they kind of address street trees or public shade trees and residential and non-residential lots. And then Wellesley pretty much had a blanket private property within the town. There were different entities had different individuals that determined when the tree permits were applicable. Concord was the building inspections department. Newton had a tree warden. Lexington had an assigned tree warden and a tree committee. I think the tree warden might have been part of the building department, if I recall correctly, and then Wellesley, the building department, handled everything. What triggered the bylaws? Wellesley and Concord were very similar. In Concord, it only dealt with residential districts. It was triggered whenever there was demolition of a structure that was greater than 250 square feet on a lot, or a new structure on a vacant lot, or a structure or addition that increased the gross floor area on the lot of greater than 50%. And it was triggered as long as there was at least one protected tree on that lot. Newton didn't really, theirs was kind of a different animal from all the others. Lexington, anytime there was proposed cutting of public shade trees, which were public and on public and private ways. So I'm assuming those would basically be within street right-of-ways. And then town trees, parks and things that wherever there were trees on town properties. And then they had demolition of residential and non-residential structures and major construction on residential and non-residential structures or lots. And then Wellesley included single and multifamily residential and commercial and office type zoning. And theirs was very similar to Concord in that it was demolition of structures over 250 square feet, new structures on a vacant lot. Retaining walls triggered it there, I'm assuming because of the grading aspect, and then structures that or additions that increase the gross floor area more than 50%. The definition of protected trees varied somewhat. Concord says anything over a 6-inch diameter breast height, the DBH, is the diameter of the tree at 4.5 feet above the ground. They define it as 6 inches inside a tree yard, which I think there's a little more information on some of those. Most of them, the tree yards were considered the zoning setbacks. Some of them had a minimum setback that had to be met even if the the zoning setback was less. Newton had an 8-inch DBH require a greater than 8-inch DBH requirement. Lexington was greater than 6 inches DBH in setback areas. I think this was the one that it was either the zoning setbacks or a minimum of 30 feet in the front or 15 feet on the side and rear. And then also public shade trees or town trees were also required a permit if you were going to do anything to them. And Wellesley was 10-inch DBH in the tree yard, and they had a specific table for tree yards in all their residential zones. And then in non-residential, it was 10-inch DBH and above. It's anywhere on the property outside of in the non-residential areas. So that one was interesting in that it didn't specify exactly where on the property. It was everywhere. You had to account for that. The protection areas were basically the critical root zones as to what is defined as being protected around the tree. In Concord, it was 1 foot diameter for each 1 inch of DBH. So if you had an 8-inch tree, then you had an 8-foot protection zone around it. And then Wellesley had a DBH times 18 inches. So basically they were 1.5 feet per inch of DBH. So if you had a 10-inch diameter DBH, then you would have a 15-foot protection diameter around the tree. Pretty much all of them required a permit. Newton had also a certificate of exemption where if you didn't have anything that met that, you filed a certificate of exemption to say that you didn't need to have a tree permit. Exemptions were only really listed in, should have left my headings. Newton and Wellesley had listed exemptions. Newton was a little strange in that it was kind of hard to follow exactly. They had, if you had a dwelling for up to 4 families on a lot, you were exempt. If you had owned the lot continuously for 90 days, you were exempt. If it remained occupied as a dwelling for 18 consecutive months, it was exempt. And if it remained owned by the same person for 18 consecutive months, it was almost like their ordinance was set up so somebody couldn't buy a property, clear cut it, and then turn around and sell it. And then this was Wellesley. Wellesley, the tree permit was exempted by subdivisions regulated by planning board because they addressed any kind of tree removal in the subdivision approval process. They apparently have a large house review through the planning board there that also would look at tree removal and tree protection. And areas under Wetland Protection Committee jurisdiction would also be dictated, kind of like here where the Conservation Commission covers that. And then town and public shade trees and any kind of emergency project, they didn't have to go through approval. All required a mitigation plan. Concord and Wellesley included any trees that were removed up to 12 months prior to you filing for your permit. So I guess if you had stumps in your yard that someone could prove you had removed that 12 months prior, that would also be included in what you had to mitigate. Protection plan was required with pretty much all of them, but the Newton. And mitigation required varied from deciduous, or you had to replace with a 1/2-inch caliper per 1 inch of DBH removed, and a minimum of 2-inch trees. They didn't want little saplings. Then evergreens, the caliper was considered 0.25 times the height of the tree that was removed, with a minimum of an 8-foot height replacement tree. Newton was relocate or replace on site with an equal DBH to what you had removed. They also had a payment in lieu of replanting or protection set up. Removal was considered okay if it interfered with streets or sidewalks or public utilities going in. And removal was okay if it was dead, diseased, or considered dangerous to the public. And then Lexington required pretty much a 1-to-1 replacement, 1-inch caliper replacement tree per 1 inch of the tree size removed, except for large shade trees that they wanted to encourage. So they would allow a 1/4 inch caliper per 1 inch DBH removed. They had a table that specified what trees were considered large shade trees. And then anything over 24-inch DBH had to be replaced at 4 times the DBH removed. So they were really pushing to save larger specimen trees. And then evergreens had to be a minimum of 6 foot height. Wellesley was pretty much the same as the first one there, except they had several overstory tree varieties that had to be, if you took down one that was on that list, you had to replace it with something that was also considered an overstory, which is basically varieties that grow to 40 feet and taller. And they actually specified invasives couldn't be planted as replacement trees. Things not requiring permits were basically pruning, anything that was considered hazardous, undesirable, or in emergencies, you could cut things if necessary. All of them had tree replacement funds that had varying degrees of cost involved with them. This one was $375 per inch of tree removed that wasn't replaced. In Newton, it was determined by the tree warden. This one was $200 per DBH removed. And then Wellesley had a sliding scale. It went like from 0 to 18 inches and 18 to 24, and then anything above 24. It was 150, 250, and 400 on a sliding scale. They all required that the tree warden or somebody from the building department inspect to make sure that any kind of mitigation plan was adhered to. There was a performance guarantee keep forgetting my towns. In Concord, there wasn't in Newton. Lexington didn't mention anything about that. And then Wellesley only really mentioned performance guarantee if the weather didn't permit it being planted immediately. If you finished up your construction, I guess in the winter, you could put up a performance guarantee or a bond to plant it once the growing season came back around. And then 3 of them mentioned fines that could be levied if things weren't adhered to. So there are some things on the books out there now in neighboring communities that do address regulation of tree removal on private property that we could kind of borrow from or take one of theirs and make it our own. Or there is a Cape Cod, I think there's a Cape Cod tree protection ordinance draft document out there that pretty much includes anything you would ever want to have in a tree protection ordinance that you can kind of cut and paste in and out what you might want to have there. Is there any discussion on what's included here? Or?
I have a question for clarification of that chart, if I may.
Go ahead.
A couple of them. And I don't know if you can answer, Curtis, but for example, I'm looking at Lexington, where the trees protected are public and private ways, residential and non-resident. What is not protected? Doesn't that cover everything? If it's not a public or a private way, what is it? If it's not residential or non-residential, what could it be?
Yeah, so I think they pretty much cover anything or cover all bases as far as.
Okay, so that just means all trees in town are protected by them. Wellesley, if you zip down to the fines or the fees, is Wellesley actually the cheapest of the towns, or are those 150, 250, 400 per inch DBH?
I don't recall. It was a sliding scale below a certain DBH was 150. From that DBH to the next level was 250.
But not 150, 250 per inch.
No. It was per inch.
Oh, it was per inch.
So if you had a large tree and you went beyond that, you were 400 per inch.
Okay, all right.
But you played 150 per inch up to that, whatever that cutoff was. And then on top of that, it was 250 per inch up to the next cutoff. And then above anything beyond that was 400 per inch. So it can get pretty expensive to take down I don't recall exactly what the...
When I was doing research, I remember how restrictive the Wellesley was and how expensive it was to take down a tree. So, but I didn't remember details. So I just wanted to get clarification on that, whether that was per inch or $400 for a big tree. One last question I have is I'm trying to read the chart and fold things in. The second column, was that Concord? I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
Concord, and well, first of all, for all of them. So do you need to replace trees and pay into the tree fund?
No,
because Concord, it looks like you do one or the other because it says payment in lieu.
I think it's pretty much one or the other in all of them. Oh, well, actually, some of them stated that you could do part of your planning and then pay in lieu for part of it.
So if I had a lot and I had, let's pretend I'm in Wellesley and I have crazy money and I wanted to chop down every tree in my lot, I pay crazy amounts of money, but I also have to replant trees. Those can be anywhere in town, or do they have to be on land I own?
They have to be on that lot. And in some cases, they mentioned it could be on abutting lots.
Okay.
It couldn't be just somewhere else. In some cases, you can do some of the replacement planning on your property. And then for whatever you can't replace, you can pay in lieu or pay into the tree protection fund. So it's a either or a combination of the two.
And then how does a town use the tree protection fund? Are they planting trees in other parts of town with that money?
Most of them, it seemed like they were putting that into a fund to plant more trees or replace
anywhere the town needed them.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they want to reforest wherever they can with the funds that they have held.
Okay.
I have one question.
Yes.
So I think it's the second last row. It talked about performance guarantee. What does that exactly mean? The row, actually, the second last row.
Basically, a bond required to make sure that the mitigation plan is carried out. So it's kind of like the performance bonds that the planning board holds for a subdivision to be all the work completed, or they can use that bond to complete the work themselves. So that's basically what the performance guarantee would be.
Okay, thanks.
And this is by no means comprehensive. It was all done a couple hours this afternoon. So I didn't get my homework done this weekend like I was supposed to. But things have been crazy, to say the least. But it kind of shows, I know when we were talking about it before, we weren't sure exactly what was out there already on the books in other communities that were regulating private property. And there are some examples, or at least these 4 examples that are definitely are addressing what we were talking about trying to address. So we could review I will send out the PDFs for these. I figured it didn't make a whole lot of sense to send them out this afternoon because nobody'd have a chance to read through them anyway. So I will send out these 4 documents and this spreadsheet or Word file table, and for everybody to kind of take in at their own leisure. And then we can, when we get back together later, we can maybe discuss a little deeper things that you might have discovered in reading through the different documents.
Curtis, I have another question for you. In doing your research, and I think the answer is going to be no, you don't know, because that would be my answer when I was doing this kind of research 2 years ago. But in doing your research, did you any sense whether there were any legal challenges, these pre-protection laws, and how those challenges?
Ted, I think you're breaking up. He's breaking up on my computer. Is he breaking up on everyone else's? Yeah. Ted, you might want to turn your video off, and maybe that'll help with the bandwidth.
Yeah,
Am I back?
Yeah, seems to be. We can try again.
So I don't know how much of my question you got, but in short, it is, did you get any sense whether there were legal challenges to any of these tree protection laws and how those challenges went?
That I'm not sure. I think they're all on the books at this point. I know one of them, I don't recall exactly which one. When I first looked several months ago, I think it was a draft, and now I think it's part of their actual zoning bylaw or their bylaws at this point. So I think they're all officially on the books. They're not really labeled as being draft ordinances, but right. I cannot say that with 100% positive.
I think as we go forward, and I want to go forward, and thank you for all of this, Curtis, especially for organizing it that way. I think when we were kicking this around, and when we were kicking around solar overlay districts, one of the things we heard from legal counsel was, you can get this approved. That doesn't mean that it will stand up in court if someone challenges it. Yeah. And so that's kind of what I'm wondering about these. Because they can get approved, it seems like. And then someone can say, we think that what the Secretary of State approved actually needs to be challenged and changed.
Like I say, I think they're all officially part of the town and city bylaws, but I'm not 100% sure of that. I guess pretty much any zoning rig can be challenged. I don't know if we start to move forward and start to draft a new or modify what we have in place, if we would want to maybe consult with town council on if they feel like it's something we could enforce without having a big pushback. Or maybe not mention that we want to mainly control solar. Although that's what started the whole thing.
Indeed.
But yeah, so I think basically what I've discovered is there are things out there that control what can happen on private property. And I was kind of surprised. I always went back to that Libertyville, Illinois ordinance that seemed so restrictive, but it looks kind of like there are some things here in Massachusetts that are very similar. They all require, well, actually, which one was it that said any? I think it was Wellesley or Lexington, maybe, that any property, but most of them had setbacks on residential property. So it was basically they wanted a buffer around the outside. The only protected trees were in those setbacks, not the entire property. Whereas one of them did have everything yeah, non-residential in Wellesley was anywhere on the property. So it was kind of harkened back to that Libertyville ordinance where before you started to develop a property, you had to do a tree survey of the entire property, labeling everything that was over what was considered a protective tree, location, size, species, and then show what you were going to protect, what you were going to remove, how you were going to mitigate all that. So actually Wellesley does have that requirement on non-residential developments. Everything else seemed like the residential did have what they kept calling a tree yard, which was basically the zoning setbacks. Anything within that was considered protected, but your little rectangle outside of that, I think you were pretty well free to remove what you wanted to.
One of the things I liked about the Libertyville one was they said you can do anything you want with invasive species, chop them down all you want, which I thought was a nice touch that I don't think I've seen, nor did we consider when we were doing things.
Yeah, that's mentioned in a couple of them that I was looking through, that invasives aren't considered, even if they're a huge invasive tree, they're not considered a protected tree, so they don't factor into your replacement or mitigation requirements.
Interestingly, it seems, and I don't mean to hog the airwaves, everybody, it seems nobody is doing total basal area, which we were kicking around for a little while.
Yeah. I think that's more of a forestry thing for large tracts of land. I know we do have some large parcels in town that, if we had a requirement that any non-residential, map every tree over 10 inches or whatever on the property, that is certainly going to affect, the solar operations. Say that might still trigger a legal challenge, and that we're picking on them. But if it's for everybody out there, then it should apply, whether it was a Walmart trying to build over on 495 or somebody trying to put a solar farm in a large forested property.
I really liked the total basal area idea. I think it was a little difficult to wrap a head around, but I liked it because I do think it would make it difficult for clear cutting for solar or other things. But if you're putting in residential areas, it's a way to say we want to save our big trees and we can cut down the small trees. And I wonder if we go forward, if maybe we consider total basal area for lots bigger than who knows what size acres. For a 50-acre lot, I just threw out a number. I have no idea if that makes any sense. Then we go to a basal area formula. I think what we were really struggling with the basal area, and then planning board struggled too, was what percentages made sense. We were kind of just guessing at percentages of clearing that was allowed. And we don't have a model to help us with that, apparently.
Yeah, I may be totally incorrect, but it seems like the basal area was kind of related more to yield for, what might be gleaned off of a property or harvested off of a property, rather than a exact accounting of what was out there. Yeah. Like say Libertyville required a tree survey no matter what you were doing. They didn't. I don't recall them having even the setbacks for residential. I think it was every tree on the property that was over the certain DBH considered protected had to be identified. I think you had to. Seems like I remember seeing tables. They would number the trees, and there would be a table that showed the DBH, the approximate height, the condition, the variety, species, whatever. So developers hated it, but tree huggers were very happy. So
I'll just offer one other thought, and then I promise I'll be quiet. I've said too much. I was curious what kind of town Libertyville is. I think we all have a bit of a sense what Concord, Lexington, Wellesley, and Newton are. Libertyville is a town northwest of Chicago, right, which is where some of the posher suburbs are. Libertyville is about 20,000 people. Their population has been steady for about 20 years. But their mean household income is under $60,000. So it's not a terribly wealthy town like these are, which I thought was interesting because I kind of assume that it's the wealthier towns that are going to be more quick to do this kind of action.
Yeah, it's a desirable town to be in it's to me kind of like Hopkinton in that it's got a great school system. Everybody wants to live there. A lot of the work I did there was people buying lots for houses that were built in the 30s and 40s with little small houses on them, tearing those down and building bigger multi-story houses that still fit within the zoning, the setbacks. They were very, I guess, they didn't really help developers any in that they required also stormwater detention for anything that was built. If you did a residential tear down and built a bigger house, you had to account for your additional stormwater runoff, even from that house, which gave me a lot of work, but it's not a really great way to manage things. Getting cut off the subject, but stormwater management is more of a regional thing rather than a lot by lot. But so yeah, they had a lot of regulations. I think they were trying to kind of clamp down on a lot of the tear down and rebuild things that were going on by having very strict regulations. But they're also in Lake County, which is very environment forward, kind of a tree hugging area. A large part of the county was in forest preserves, where the county had bought up a lot of property and made huge swaths of parks and hiking trails and everything. So, any other comments, suggestions?
Through the chair, I just wanted to add an observation. Based on the chart that you shared, looks like Lexington is the most extensive of because it covers both public and private ways, residential and non-residential lots and stuff like that. And based on that, the who determines applicability, I see that there is a tree committee supporting the tree warden to take care of that, to review. I'm assuming because the number of cases to review would be high, and based on that, so I feel like it seems like directly connected to how extensive is the tree law versus how much staff do you have to handle it. Right now, I think at least based on what Hopkinton has, we just have a tree warden. So that maybe to keep in mind that if we go really extensive, try to cover everything, then we have to support the tree warden too.
Yeah, if I recall correctly, the tree committee was really things went to the tree committee if the tree warden, someone objected to what the tree warden decision was. They had an appeal to the tree committee. Yeah, that would add a level. I think our tree warden the public works director? Is that how it's set up here? Or, okay, so we don't actually have an individual that is. I mean, some communities that I've dealt with in the past had a town forester that managed, what the town had and was there to consult with private property owners as far as forestry management. But I guess it depends on how far the town wants to go with it.
Through the chair, John, is the DPW head always the tree warden? I kind of had in my head that was a temporary, that we didn't reappoint or something.
Yeah, so there was a full-time tree warden, but it hasn't been appointed since I've been here. So he is the acting tree warden, and I don't know of any plans to change that.
Curtis?
I don't need any more to do. I would think about it if we could push it forward, but
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I just add one small more comment to add. Like one of the I think it was the exemption or something. Undesirable was one of the reasons why you could take a tree out. So which seems like a very broad category too. I don't know. It was on the second page. So that's something like a loophole like that. Like if you keep going down, I think activities not requiring the permit, undesirable is a very broad umbrella. You can call anything undesirable, not require a permit. So maybe,
pretty much was invasives.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Just wanted clarification.
I pulled that word out of their wording, but I think the undesirable was basically an invasive species that they didn't want propagated in town.
That's perfect to know. I just assume if they call it aesthetically undesirable, anything could be that. So that's what.
Yeah, like say anything that was dangerous, diseased, things like that. The tree warden could determine that yes, it could come down without any kind of mitigation because it was dying anyway, or if it was going to fall on somebody's house because of that disease or damage, that it could come down. So there were some loopholes that you could get away with not having to do any kind of mitigation.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much. This is a very clear picture of what's happening and how to compare and stuff.
And for everyone's reading pleasure, I will send these 4 ordinances around in an email. I think the next thing might be to peruse some of them and see if there's other questions that come up and everybody else is going through them maybe in a little bit more time than I had today to do it. And then kind of, I guess we need to come up with a consensus of how we think we want to move forward. I was going to go back and add Hopkinton as another column, but we didn't address a lot of this in what we had before. So, just depends on where everybody's leaning as far as how strict we want to be. Do we want to, I think the consensus originally was we did definitely want to deal with non-residential areas because that's where, most of the tree removal is coming in. But we didn't want to take away rights of someone who, wanted to cut down the tree next to their house. But if it's dangerous, they should be able to take it down anyway per the, most of these regulations. So like I say, I think the next thing, maybe I'll send these around, send this table out. Anybody can make any notes or whatever. So the next time we meet, we can maybe delve a little deeper into it. Maybe everybody pick their favorite go-by version that they would like to try to move forward with, or do we want to go back and try to modify what we put together before, or go back to the Cape Cod? I think I have a PDF copy of that also. It was kind of a check off boxes of what you wanted included. So I think it kind of included every possibility. So maybe that would be a good starting point to decide what we want to eliminate and what we want to move forward with.
Curtis, I'm sorry for speaking up. I have another question.
That's what we're here for.
Do you have any sense who is on Lexington's tree committee? Is it a subcommittee of planning board? Is it its own standing committee completely? Do you have any?
They had specifications for who was to be involved with it. And I think seems like it was from different boards, somebody from each board, and then probably kind of like we are, I think, some board representatives and some citizens.
Right, but then we report very clearly to the planning board.
Right.
I wonder if theirs is the same, or if
I think they went to planning board too.
Yeah.
I can't recall if Lexington was under the building department or planning. I think it was under planning, but yeah, I think they were they were the only ones with the tree committee. So I think they had pretty well spelled out who was going to be on the committee and what their operations were.
John, may I ask you a question?
Sure.
Back when we were kicking this around, you mentioned offhand that Medway had a tree protection law on their town meeting warrant. And I think it probably had to do with that massive, massive warehouse that ultimately is not being built, but a bunch of trees were cleared. I have only done Google searches once every 3 months to see if I can find anything out about that, and I come up with nothing. Do you know anything about Medway's?
I don't, but I can look into it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. I remember seeing something about that too.
I could easily pick up the phone and call, and I just haven't done it. But I Google ought to turn up the Medway Independent or something if there was some discussion about it. And I haven't seen anything.
One similarity, excuse me, amongst all these towns in this town in Illinois, I found a 360 view from a church tower. They have a lot of tree-lined boulevards. Like all the main ways have really nice trees planted right next to the sidewalks. All the suburbs have trees all on their sidewalks. So there was a lot of urban planning involved. And I know from student teaching in Wellesley, they have a lot of that. So does Lexington, Concord, and Newton. So that's what they're spending the money on probably is planting trees in the urban areas.
Yeah, keeping up what they've got there. Yeah, because there were a lot of the communities strictly have public tree and street tree ordinances and don't address private property. These were the 4 that I found in the area that did address private property. There are a lot of ordinances out there, like say, that are strictly public property. So, if we're gonna go beyond that, then these are pretty good examples to look into. But if we can all kind of take a look at them and decide if there's one that a favorite that you might want to kind of start as a starting point and add to or take away from. I'll also send out that Cape Cod draft, or I guess it was a skeleton for a template. Come up with my words here. A template for a tree removal that kind of included everything. So everybody can do a little bit of homework, and then we can come back again and see if anybody's got any preferences on exactly which way we want to try to go. First, I guess we need some planning board input too, as to what they think would be palatable.
John, do we have a next scheduled meeting, and is it after there's supposed to be reappointments?
Looking now. Looks like September 12th is the next scheduled meeting.
Is that before reappointments?
No, after. So reappointments will take place at the next planning board meeting on the 29th of August. So that was one of the things that I was going to mention. Thank you for the reminder, Ted. If you guys would like to serve on Zach again, you need to get reappointed. I think, and I can send out another email. I think there's one person who might not need to get reappointed, but everything else is expiring. So apply through the town's website for the boards and commissions. If you need any help, just reach out to me.
John, I'm here as a Concom rep. Is that a 1-year or a 2-year thing?
So all of the planning or all of the board liaisons are 1 year.
Okay.
If you're not a board liaison, you are an at-large or an alternate. And I believe one at-large seat is not expiring, but I don't remember whose it is. Everyone else's does expire. So I can send out an email tomorrow. I thought I did send out an email, but let me see.
Yeah, seems like I've seen something, but yeah, I guess if you had something that gave us the process for doing that. Now, if we have an application on file, can we just have
submit again?
Just to go again? Okay.
Yeah.
Seems like last time I dealt with the planning board, it was still in the system. All I had to do was say resubmit it. Or
I have a question about the process itself of drafting the document. How can someone just briefly describe that, and what's the timeline we are working with?
John, I guess the goal is to always have something ready for, is January the cutoff for town meeting?
Yeah, so if we want to get something on the town meeting warrant, it would be January.
Okay, so we would have to have a draft document put together and approved by planning board by January.
Yeah.
I would say, however, given something of this magnitude, I think it would be wise for us to be able to give planning board something before then, because I think they're going to really want to think about it and maybe ask us to reconsider some things.
And it might not, I guess Mary will be hopefully at the next meeting, and maybe we can bounce it off of her as a planning board member. You know, what is the appetite for moving forward with trying to control actions on private property before we go too far without any guidance. Or maybe she could take it back to planning board and bounce it off of them.
I always want to remind us, everything zoning does is control action on private property. That's the whole point of it. So I don't think that phrase that we should run from it. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
So
if that's what we want to happen in the town, then that's the way you do it. So I guess we will move on from this item. I will distribute these 4 ordinances and the Cape Cod ordinance template, and send this. I'll just make a PDF out of this table and send that around. Anybody wants to make notes in the margins as they're reading through the terribly interesting other ordinances. So, and then we can take this up at the next meeting, or if something else pushes it, we can put it off. But like I say, if we're into September now, so if we want to get something put together, for the next town meeting, I guess we ought to probably get moving. By September, everybody will be back from vacation, and maybe our attendance will be a little better. So I guess we'll close our tree protection discussion. And item 2 is the minutes of June 27th, 2022. Did anybody have any issues or corrections to that?
I do.
Okay.
So I wasn't at the meeting, but I did watch it on HCAM afterwards. I watched it on YouTube. And John, I notice in also present, I don't know about Brett and Laura McKenzie, but Holly Paharic is going into 10th grade. That's the daughter of the Paharic married couple that was there. They may have been using her Zoom account. I don't know. But it was Ben and Sarah Paharic that spoke at the meeting. Holly didn't speak.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Any other corrections or comments? If not, I guess I'll ask for a motion to approve them as modified.
John, just really quickly, that's Sarah with an H at the end.
Is there a motion to approve the minutes as modified?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Second, okay. See what, I'm going to quit sharing here so I can see who all's on the call. I haven't done this in a while. I'm trying to figure out how to get back in the saddle here. Okay, so we'll vote. James Burton.
Yes.
Madhu.
Yes.
Nisha.
Yes.
Ted.
Yes.
Oh, Rachel showed up. Rachel.
Yes.
Okay, and Curtis is yes. So we are approving our minutes. So the next meeting, you said would be September 12th. Will that need to be, well, I guess the governor's order on remote meetings has been extended to March. But now it's up to us as to whether we want to go to in-person or not.
Yes.
Okay. I guess we don't have to really decide that right now. Is there a preference for staying with Zoom or going to in-person, or?
I, for one, find the Zoom really easy.
Yeah.
And I don't think that we are, on the Conservation Commission, we're constantly looking at plans and things, and that makes Zoom more difficult. I think looking at a document like yours works really well on Zoom.
Yeah.
I'm not afraid to meet in person. I was leery of that some months ago. I just find this really convenient. That's my own thought.
Yeah, and I know weather-wise also the town hall is hot, so I get if you want to push that decision to a later date.
Maybe October, November, we'll try for in-person.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll say the 9/12 meeting will be another Zoom. I guess 7 p.m. is our typical. Okay, I will, I guess.
Oh, before you do that, I just want to give everyone a heads up again about applying to be on the board again. So get that in. And then we've gotten revised guidelines for the MBTA communities that gives us a little bit more flexibility. So I'm going to add that to the next agenda, and I could go over what the changes are.
Okay, good.
We're going to have to start moving on that. Our deadline for the zoning to be in place is December 31st, 2024. So we have enough time, but we do have to take steps by January 31st of 2023. So I don't know if it's anything Zach needs to do, but it's something that we should definitely discuss, and I can update you all on the updated regulations at the next meeting.
And that's the overlay district allowing the increased zoning or increased occupancy levels. Correct. Okay. Yeah, that'd be a good thing to bring up at the next one too. I'm very interested in that, being in the middle of it. So. Okay, I guess I'll entertain a motion to adjourn our meeting. And
so moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay. Take a vote here, James.
Yes.
Madhu.
Yes.
Nisha.
Yes.
Ted.
Aye.
Rachel.
Yes.
Curtis is a yes. Okay, we will do this again on September 12th.